So I don't know about you guys, but I did not know about this rumor that Bellator is going to end with their event in February. I'm sorry, I can't remember if it was February or March. Regardless, soon in 2025, early 2025, the first quarter, it seems like Bellator is actually going to come to an end. This is very disappointing news because I didn't know about this. I just saw a bunch of other people making videos on it. I was like, oh my god, okay, I guess that is the rumor. You have guys like John McCarthy talking about it, Josh Thompson talking about it, and with the events of Bellator getting canceled and just having like 4 or 5 events a year, it's not looking good for Bellator. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to give my thoughts in just a second. Before we do, though, I do want to say hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with many YouTube channels. Guys, let's talk about Bellator. So if you have been following the channel, you might know that I have been watching Bellator pretty well since I have been a UFC fan, that being for over a decade. I love Bellator. It's just a very, very nostalgic organization. Is it the best organization in the world? No, but I really do believe that people over-exaggerate how boring Bellator can be sometimes. Yeah, you know what? They do have some fights that really, really suck, especially some main events, right? But regardless, it's still MMA. I love watching the martial arts, and I've just loved the Bellator brand. So this is really, really disappointing news here because I was familiar with everything going on about Gegard Mousasi right now, but I didn't know there were more guys over in Bellator, like Patchy especially, like talking about not wanting to fight and being frustrated about actually not being able to fight. I knew that was going on with some other fighters, but I didn't know that it was such a big issue with a lot of Bellator fighters specifically. I've just never thought about it. Like, while I do keep up with the media and I keep up with the events of Bellator, I'm not like overly invested in what the Bellator fighters are doing. It's very difficult to keep up with, of course, but it's disappointing here because I was so for Gegard Mousasi because obviously he's getting completely screwed. If you guys don't know what's going on with Gegard Mousasi and a lot of other Bellator fighters, PFL isn't offering them any fights. They don't want to pay him because, of course, these Bellator guys are on fantastic contracts. They don't want to fork up the money. Yet, Francis Ngannou comes about, and all of a sudden, they're willing to give all of the money to Francis Ngannou. It's ridiculous. So, for those of you who are so quick to really, really hate on Dana White and the UFC and talk about how great the PFL is, and there's a lot of MMA fans that do that because you have Don Davis sitting here being like, we're fighter first. We want to make our fighters happy. But they're only making a couple fighters happy, and those fighters are then talking about how great the PFL is. It's all just weird to me. I'm really disappointed because I made a video a long time ago when Bellator first got bought out, and I listened to the interview with Don Davis over on Ariel Helwani's show, and he was saying all of the right things. I was sitting back and I'm like, okay, I'm going to support this guy because he didn't want to shut down Bellator, or we don't know if he was lying or if it just didn't work out. I actually, to be honest with you, I don't know which I believe. But regardless, he was saying all of the right things and things like we have dedicated Bellator fans, dedicated MMA fans who love and adore this product. Why would we get rid of it? We're just going to turn it into the championship series. And I really respected that because once we knew that there were rumors about Bellator being bought out, Bellator being shut down, and when the PFL bought Bellator, I was like, oh, that's the end of Bellator because I don't personally really like the PFL's product. It's just, I'll watch the PFL if there's nothing else to watch. I genuinely love the Bellator product. I love the environment, the way they do walkouts. I like a lot of their fighters, even though I understand it would make the PFL a little bit better if the Bellator fighters were exclusively over in the PFL. But I like the commentators, the analysts. I just love the Bellator event. So what Don Davis was saying when it first got bought out really resonated with me as an MMA fan. I've been watching Bellator since I became an MMA fan. My dad and I have watched every single event that we possibly could, right? So it made me happy. And I was like, dude, I'm definitely going to be supporting what Don Davis is doing, and I'm going to support the PFL. Now it's coming about that all of these Bellator fighters are, I don't know how many are actually going to sue because Gegard Mousasi is suing the PFL, right? Because he's not getting any fights. I don't know how else to say that. That's just straight up scummy. And there's no way that Gegard can lose that case, right? Because he's under a contract, he needs to get fights, and they're not giving him fights, and he can't go anywhere. I know now he's been released, but still, I would imagine that he's definitely going to win that case, because you could argue, too, the dude's wasted to the prime of his career, and so many other great Bellator fighters that are on these fantastic contracts that want to change their lives. They're training so hard. They're constantly posting about how hard they're training. Guys that have been active in Bellator are no longer able to fight in either Bellator or the PFL. They're just not... I don't understand how the PFL can get away with this. You need to offer your fighters fights. You can't just keep them under contract and not give them any work and not pay them. Am I wrong? They're just going to lose this lawsuit, especially if more fighters jump on it. And I get that they may not have the funds, but there's nothing you can do about that, really. And they might even do have the funds, though, because we know that we have the money overseas that are supposedly going to the PFL events. You put in however much you put in for Francis Ngannou, which is crazy to me. And I'll reiterate that for you, for everybody talking about how awesome it is that, like, I mean, good for Francis. I don't personally like Francis Ngannou, but he did do what he set out to do, of course, and I don't understand why the PFL wanted to fork over that much. And I know that the number's been floating around. I've been watching a lot of YouTube this week about this topic, and it's been floating around that the Ngannou pay-per-view only sold 10K buys. Who could have saw that coming? Francis Ngannou, the big star. It doesn't make sense. On another note, another video that I was watching this week was AJ over at MMA Experts, which if you guys obviously, like I would imagine if you're watching this channel, you are familiar with MMA Experts. They're a fantastic, fantastic channel over there. And he was talking about the idea of a lot of hardcore fans potentially boycotting the PFL. I'm actually like, if these fighters are not getting the work that they deserve and the Bellator product that I personally love, like, I'm not going to support the PFL anymore. The problem is, I'm down to do that stuff. I really am. But are enough people really not going to watch a PFL to make a difference? Or does it even matter? Does it even matter? They have the money from overseas. Does it matter how many people they have watching? They constantly put on these events. They're putting on these events for these fighters that are getting paid much less than the Bellator fighters, but that's not fair to the Bellator fighters. When you bought Bellator, you knew these guys were on these specific contracts. You knew how much money you're supposed to pay them, and you're supposed to offer fights. It's straight up criminal. MMA is a young man sport, and all of these guys that are 29, 30, 31, even if you start to get into the late 30s, these guys have time on their clock. They don't have all the time in the world to wait around for the PFL to get a little bit more money, which are they even going to be able to do? Can they afford it? If they can, are they just gatekeeping these fighters? Because, again, we just saw how much Francis Ngannou made. This whole thing doesn't make sense to me. It's just wrong to do to these fighters. And it sucks because now they're stuck at the PFL. Now they're stuck, and even if, like, I don't know, God knows how long it's going to take for them to sue. So many fighters are primed up to, if they want to be active, make hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars with their contracts, and they can't even get out of it. They can't even get a shot at the UFC. They can't even get a shot at any other organization, even if they want to fight. They're stuck there. I don't understand how the PFL is getting away with this. It doesn't make any sense to me. I hope more fighters are doing what Gegard Mousasi is doing, and I'm very, very disappointed in Don Davis, and because when he came onto the scene, he was saying all the right things. When our fighters are, and we are fighter first, we want our fighters to be happy. None of the Bellator fighters are happy. None of them. So again, I hope Mousasi wins his case. I would imagine that he's going to win, and I hope that other Bellator fighters follow suit because these guys are training hard. They want their money. They're in the prime of their career, and it's being robbed from them completely. It's not okay. These guys are trying to support their families. These guys are trying to make as much money as they possibly can because, again, time's ticking. This is a young man's sport. This is not okay at all. At the very least, they should be free agents because there's a lot of names, and I'm sure that the UFC would scoop up quite a few of those names. You don't think the UFC would want Patchy Mix, Johnny Eblin? That would be fantastic. But even if Bellator has other talent, that's fantastic, and they could go anywhere. At least give them some opportunity to make money elsewhere if you're going to refuse to pay them. What's the point of just sitting back, sitting down, and then just having your product? Plus, what's going to happen if Bellator really actually just gets scrapped? They're all going to become PFL fighters, and I mean, they kind of technically are. Are they just going to be in the PFL, or is it because they were under a Bellator contract, they're going to all become free agents? I have no idea how that's going to work, but this is crazy. I didn't know that this was going on. I didn't know these rumors were happening, and I didn't know how many fighters were actually frustrated. And that frustrates me as an MMA fan, man, because the idea that Bellator is just going to close down after some random event it doesn't really sit well with me. I love Bellator. I know it's a very, very niche part of the hardcore MMA fandom that really likes Bellator, but man, I watched Bellator just every single time that I could with my dad growing up, and it's gonna be like it's like when you lose a WEC for all of you WEC fans out there, you know? It's just weird. It's sad. I don't like it. I feel bad for all these fighters. It's gonna be weird to find out what happens in 2025. Let me know what you think about everything down below, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Check out this video on screen at YouTube. Thinks you will like this video the best if you want to keep watching the channel. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Take care.